Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Marty's Hockey. My name is Sandisiwe Tabata, and I'm delighted to be your host for today's session. Before I commence with the formal introduction, please just note that we are recording today's webinar and it will be made available on Marty's Hockey social media platforms. So I'd like to begin by first extending a warm welcome to our guest, Jes Foord, all our attendees today, including the representatives from the university, senior management of Marty Sport, as well as sports managers, administrators, the larger hockey community, and most importantly, the Marty's Hockey alumni. We really appreciate all of you taking your time to engage in what is an important societal issue, and we'd like to apologize for the delay. We trust that you will find today's webinar fruitful, and we really look forward to your interactions a bit later. Today's topic, as we know, is gender-based violence, and the National Strategic Plan document defines GBV as a general term used to capture violence that occurs as a result of the normative role expectations associated with gender, the sex assigned to a person at birth, as well as the unequal power relations between genders within the context of a specific society. GBV includes physical, sexual, verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse, or threats such as acts of abuse, coercion, and economic or educational deprivation, whether occurring in public or private life, in the peacetime and during armed or other forms of conflict, and may cause physical, sexual, psychological, economic, or emotional harm. South Africa is one of the most unsafe societies to live in as a woman, and I'd actually like to read a part of a poem by Koleka Potuma, who articulates what it is to live as a woman in our society. This country hangs our dignity at half-mast, waves our bodies as lessons to be learned, as moments that should teach us something, as modules, tests, experiments. My existence is not for your teaching, to dislocate my mother's throat 6 feet under, and compensate her grief with scholarships and amended policies. Policies that have gathered dust before they have even been drafted. This country buries us before we are born, calls us by our obituaries before it calls us by our names. Our guest today is Jes Foord, a survivor of gender-based violence, and she will take us along her journey of what it took to become who she is today. I encourage you as attendees to please interact with us and ask any questions throughout our conversation. You can do this by typing your question in the Q&A function or what will be the meeting chat. And this will be monitored throughout. So with this being said, we are ready to begin. Just after reading up on you, your story truly speaks about rising above one's circumstances. You're a survivor, and many of us are. However, the reality in our society, with such high numbers of violence against women, many aren't. All women in South Africa now sit with the question that to ask ourselves, am I next? And you have created a platform that speaks to survivors and speaks on awareness of what this nation suffers from. So could you please share a bit about your story and what your foundation is about?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. Sorry about the technical difficulties. We'll blame it on the hair color. In 2008, my dad and I went for a walk with our dogs near a small dam in Hillcrest. And on our way to the dam, we were confronted by 4 men. I just remember hearing this noise behind me, and I turned around to be met by the barrel of a gun in my face. And if I close my eyes now, I can still see that image. I think it'll be with me for the rest of my life. Straight away, I put my hands in the air and I said to them, take what you want. They took all the jewelry I'd been given for my 21st, just the year before. They took my dad's cell phone, my cell phone, and then they started asking us for money. We said to them over and over, we don't have any money on us. This is, we're at a dam. We have no need to have money with us. So they then started getting more sort of angry and agitated, and they then asked my dad for the keys to his bakkie. Straight away, he gave them the keys. They then took us up to where the bakkie was parked, and they took my dad and put him in the passenger seat and myself in the back seat. and they tried over and over to start the car. They kept stalling. They couldn't find the right gears. My dad tried to start the car for them and said, you know, just take the car and go. And then they obviously gave up on that one, and they threw my dad out the car. They then threw me out the car. And they then just pointed away and said to us, just go. And this feeling of relief came over me. You know, that's what it's like to be hijacked. That's what it's like to be robbed. You always hear of people talking about it, but you never think it's going to happen to you. And we didn't know where we were walking. We just walked away. And they then unfortunately came up behind us again. This time they were a lot louder, a lot angrier, and they just seemed a lot more agitated, and they started pushing us, and we realized they were pushing us towards a ditch. And when we got to the top of the ditch, it's about 3 meters high, they pushed my dad in first. They then pushed me in. They then climbed in the bottom of the ditch where we were, and they took my dad to one side where they tied his hands to his legs to a tree. They then took his little fishing hat off his head, and they shoved it down his throat with a knife. The one stayed with my dad, the others then turned to me. They pushed me to the floor, pulled my panties to my knees, and the first one climbed on. Then the second one climbed on. Then the third one climbed on. And then the fourth one climbed on. I think you often hear of people talking about an out-of-body experience, and you picture them floating in the sky, looking down on their body. And I can honestly say I had an out-of-body experience. It wasn't all like it is in the movies, but it was as if my body was not my own. These men were asking me to cooperate with them, to move backwards and forwards. One of them put his penis to my lips and told me to open my mouth, but it was as if I was paralyzed. It was as if there was nothing. I just lay there. There was nothing I could do. It was as if I had no control over my body whatsoever. And I really feel that when somebody rapes you, they take you, they take your body. But what really makes up each and every one of us, each person, I think it's more our mind, our personality, our spirit, and those are not physical things. You can't hold those things in your hands. So when somebody rapes you, they take your body. They don't take you, unless you let them, unless you give up, unless you choose to let it own you. And you really have to make a decision on whether you want to become a victim or whether you want to become a survivor. And it's not an easy decision. It's not something that happens overnight. It's not something that's the same for everybody, but it is a decision that I think everybody can get to with the help of counseling and proper care. And the best way that I feel to describe that is, if something traumatic happens to you, and it doesn't have to be rape or abuse, it could be losing a loved one, it could be absolutely anything. And when that trauma happens to you, it's like a big ball of poison that goes inside you, and it sits in your stomach, and it starts bubbling and oozing, and really it makes you nauseous, it makes you not want to eat, it makes you have stomach cramps, it makes you have headaches, it ruins you. So every time you talk to somebody about your trauma, it's like you're spitting a little bit of that poison out. And every time you cry about what has happened to you, you are crying a bit of that poison out. So the more you talk and the more you cry, the smaller and smaller and smaller that ball of poison gets. I'm not saying that ball of poison is going to go away. It will never go away completely. It will always be a scar within you. But the same with any scar, it heals, it gets better, and you only notice it every now and then when you're reminded of it, or when you look at it, or, you know, triggers or whatever. But so through counseling and being able to talk to a professional who knows, they may not have been through it themselves, but they have studied, they know how the brain works and how emotions work and how triggers work. So with working through it with a counselor, they teach you coping mechanisms. So they teach you, when you have that trigger, this is how you respond. Or when, you know, you hear a loud noise behind you, instead of running away, stop, turn around and look. It's just, yeah, little things that you get taught. Your different counselors work differently with different people, but it is so, I really think it is so important. Counseling is really such an important part of any trauma, for my personal opinion. And yeah, so after everything had happened to me, and I went through the experience of being taken to, my dad and I, once these men had finished with us, they left, and my dad and I managed to climb out of the ditch, get all of our dogs back together, and we were found by two ladies who were walking their horses. They were riding their horses, sorry, and at first they were very hesitant. I mean, we were covered in mud and all sorts, and climbing out of this ditch, they were a bit hesitant at first, but after we explained ourselves, they were extremely helpful. They managed to use the horses' reins to help us get our dogs back together, and they then took us back to a local restaurant sort of area, and the police were then called, the social workers were called, and I was taken from there to the police station, where I was taken to a back room and told I have to wait for someone on duty to be able to help me. Then from there, I was taken to the district surgeon, who at the time, for those of you who know Durban quite well, was in the middle of Pinetown next to the train station, and it was now about 7 o'clock at night, and my mom and I were alone waiting for the district surgeon to arrive. He took 45 minutes. You are then examined in a situation which almost feels like being raped again for a second time. It's very invasive. It's very, and I mean, he's a doctor who he has lots of people he needs to get to, so he doesn't have time to hold your hand and stroke your head and tell you everything's going to be okay. He needs to get that evidence to where it needs to go. So you really are pulled from pillar to post, and you're in a very fragile state. I was very lucky to have had my mom there with me, and I was very lucky to have had my whole community back me. And I realized about 2 months in, I realized how alone I felt and how scared I felt, and I realized how much support I have, and I still felt like that. So that's when the idea of the foundation was built, is that I realized how many people are going through this on a daily basis, and they're doing it alone. They have no one. So the foundation was born to try and be that someone for the people who have no one. And we started in 2008, the end of 2008. We officially registered in 2009, and we since have various projects that we run. Just to name a few is our handbag project, where we we get donated handbags, which we fill with toiletries, toothbrush, toothpaste, shampoo, conditioner, body lotion, pair of panties, sanitary pads, and a note explaining where you can go for counselling, etc. And we give those out to all the Tutuzela centres and crisis centres around the whole of KZN and Johannesburg. And those bags are then given to survivors as soon as they've been examined, because again, I was able to go home and shower, and I had a shower full of shampoo, conditioner, soap, you know, things we all take for granted, whereas majority of the people that this is affecting maybe have one bar of soap that they wash their dishes with, wash their clothes with, and wash themselves with. So to be given that handbag, I mean, the responses we've had, the feedback we've had from survivors has been unbelievable. And also just to have a handbag. I mean, as a woman, a handbag is like, it's your thing, you know, and so many women don't have that. So to be able to give them that is a very special beginning of a process. And we don't say that it's going to fix anything. It's just to help them get clean on the outside, so that we can then help them with their journey through counselling and getting clean on the inside. And then another project we run is our mentorship program, where we work with young men, which I'm sure we'll get into a bit later. But yeah, if you want any more information about all the different projects we run, it is on our website and our Facebook and our Instagram. And it's all Jes with one S. It's probably backwards, but Jes with one S and Foord with 2 O's.
Yeah. I think I just want to say, if anybody wishes to disengage, they may. But thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm very delighted to know what your foundation has grown to be and what it is for, because yeah, not everyone is met with the same sort of tools, and to be able to assist with that, it really does go a long way. And we know that today this month we do celebrate Women's Month, And in historical context, we know that this month is meaningful. A question was asked by the Institute for Justice and Reconciliation, and I'd like to ask, in your opinion, is the dedication for Women's Month in any way meaningful?
I think for myself and as a foundation, we actually were discussing this the other day, is that for us, Women's Day and Women's Month represents a march that took place a number of years ago. So for us, it's not necessarily this is the only month we celebrate women, and why don't we celebrate women every month, and all that, you know, media that goes on around that. For us, we are celebrating a march that changed history. So that's what we're celebrating. We're not celebrating women as a gender. It's just a time to celebrate a change in history that was incredible. And going forward, we feel that every day is Women's Day if we make it Women's Day. If we stand up and we say, right, we are going to make change. We don't need to make that change during August. We can make that change any day of the year, 365. And I think again, that's what we do as a job. So it's easy for us. So it is nice to have a month dedicated, and it has become about women. I think the whole reason why this day started has almost been forgotten. I mean, a lot of people don't even know what it is about. They just think it's a day where we celebrate women. So I think it's nice to be able to have a platform to be able to speak to so many people, and it is our busiest month. It is when we get the most done and most awareness out there, and our most connections going forward. And does that make sense?
Yeah, just make sure I'm off mic. I definitely agree that it does have a historical purpose. And going forward, but we should continue to create awareness throughout the entire year and not just dedicate it to a specific month. Because the realities are real, the realities are every day. So I definitely believe that we should continue to speak about this and address this and make people aware. And my question as well to you is, what role does society play on the role and treatment of women? And how does that translate in the household, in the workspace and classrooms, just in everyday interactions?
I think a lot has changed over time. I mean, you see it's flooded all over social media at the moment, with all those sort of olden day, can I say that, sort of books and articles about how a woman, you know, when her man gets home, dinner must be prepared and she must be looking her best, and if he would like to have intercourse, she must be ready, and even if she doesn't feel like it, she must keep quiet and keep those thoughts to herself, and all those sorts of things. And I think if you take the role of a woman from then and you look at us now, we have grown incredibly, and there is so much to be, you know, so it's so inspirational to see how far women have come as a gender, and it's for me, I think it is so inspirational. But I also feel that we've been given a voice now to be able to speak out about how we are treated and speak out about what is right and what is wrong. And I feel that's why it is so important for us to use that voice, and for us to not keep quiet, and for us to speak out if something is happening to us. And as a gender, we need to also stick together and realize that, for me personally, I feel that we are living in a society where we are teaching people how not to be raped or abused, as opposed to teaching people not to do it in the first place. So for us, our mentorship program is it doesn't make sense really to most people, the fact that we're focusing so much on boys when it is Women's Month and it is a month around women. But for us, it's us saying, well, who is treating the woman bad? Who is beating the woman? Who are the ones causing this? And I use the ones loosely because it does happen to men a lot, and there are women who abuse as well. But the overall is it's men doing it to women. So we need to change the idea of those men. We need to teach the youth how to grow up to be like we as women have come so far from being women who just are submissive and do what we're told, and the whole barefoot pregnant in the kitchen sort of stigma. We have broken that, so now we need to break the male side of it. We need to show the men that it's actually not okay to talk to a woman like that. It is not okay to treat a woman like that. And it also, I think, this whole rape culture is such a big thing. I mean, there are so many WhatsApp groups and Facebook pages, and I know there was one I came across, I was absolutely horrified, and it was called For the Sickos or something. And it was pictures, and it was just pictures of women's private parts and people having sex, and it was just absolutely disgusting to think that people have themselves made the decision to join this group and receive these messages and share them around. And it's just become so, like, the word rape itself has become so loosely used. Like, people will say, oh yes, like, did you see the rugby match, they raped us? And it's nobody, instead of, and I think you have a group of men and one of them says that, even if one feels uncomfortable about it, they'll all just keep quiet and they'll go, yeah, it's wrong, eh? But then we just need to have that one man to stand up and say, that's not really the right way to say it, guys. Do you know what rape is? Rape is actually where a woman is held down and somebody has sex with her against her will. It's not a rugby match. And the more conversations like that come up and are had amongst young men, I think it will hopefully make them realize. And also, I had a conversation with a group of young girls the other day, and they were very much, I want to say man haters, but they were very angry about men in general, and they were young girls. They were sort of 19, 20, and for me, I was saying to them, don't be angry at the men and write them off completely and say men are bad and men are horrible and men don't care about women. Rather have that conversation with the men in your life. Sit down with them and say, for example, so you're sitting with a group of guys and you say to them, when you guys last got an Uber, did you wait inside until the Uber arrived at the gate, or were you happy to stand outside by yourself? And when you go for a run in the morning, are you constantly checking behind you to see if someone's after you? When somebody walks past you, do you have to turn back to make sure they've carried on walking? That is the society that us women are having to live in. Stuff that you take for granted and you don't realize is stuff that we're having to deal with on a daily basis. We are living in fear. Even if we don't know we're doing it, we are. You subconsciously, I'm sure every single woman on this webinar has walked down a road, someone has walked past them, or in a shopping center or anywhere in a parking lot, anybody has walked past them, you've all turned back to make sure that they've carried on walking. And it's something that men don't have to worry about. So I think just making them aware of all these things and almost personalizing it. Again, the group of girls said to me, we shouldn't have to personalize it. And I said, well, we also shouldn't have to be looking behind us, and we shouldn't have to be doing things like that. But to personalize it, to say to these men who joke, oh, that rugby match, they raped us, to sit down and say, how would you feel if somebody said that and your daughter had been raped? Or how would you feel if your wife had been raped? It wouldn't be so funny then. And it really, men are very protective over their women, as much as they like to know that, I mean, especially these big, strong, macho men, they've all got a soft heart, a soft spot for mommy, a soft spot for their little girl. And as soon as you personalize it and you say to them, every woman out there that is being raped or abused is somebody's mother, it's somebody's daughter, it's somebody's, wife. It personalizes it for them, and it makes them almost realize that it's actually not a joke.
There's actually two parts that you mentioned that I'd like to discuss. The first part was that when you mentioned about victims should have a voice and make use of their voice. So I'd like to ask you, and I'll address the second part in this after you answer this question. What makes it difficult, though, for women and men to speak up about the experiences of gender-based violence?
I think, for me, the number one issue is the stigma that is attached to rape. You feel, I mean, you take anybody and you say, oh, Susie was raped last weekend. The first questions that come up are not, is she okay? Or, you know, is she going for counseling? Or, you know, can I do anything to help? It's, oh, where was she? Who was she with? Was she drunk? What was she wearing? So there's the stigma attached immediately when it happens. You automatically think people are going to judge me. If I say something, people are going to see me as a different person. People are going to treat me differently. So there's that first stigma. And then also the statistics are sitting at the moment that for the statistics in South Africa, 70% of reported rapes, of rapes in general, 70%, the victim knows the perpetrator. So it's a case of it's an uncle, or it's a neighbor, or it's a stepfather, or etc., etc. So I think it's also, there's the threat where they'll say to them, if you tell anybody, I'll hurt your mother, or if you tell anybody, I'll kill you, or, you know, those sorts of things. So there's that fear as well. Then there's also sort of community issues where the shaming issue, your family will say to you, don't say anything, because if you say something, the rest of the community is going to, you know, outcast us. And then there's also the grooming side of it, with the children especially, is the case where no, everybody does this, or this is what uncles and nieces do. You're supposed to touch each other like that, and for a child that's never been taught any different, that's what they expect. So they don't know any different, so they don't know to say anything, which is also why I feel it is so important for. Sorry, it's coming. Nothing's sliding. Sorry. Why it is so important for education amongst, and when I say the youth, I mean the littlies. Like, I'm talking 3 to 5 year olds. I've got 2 6-year-olds at the moment, and I promise you, they know everything about everything. They know who's allowed to touch them where, they know all these sorts of things. And something else we were discussing, I know it's a little bit off topic, but while I remember it, is when we talk to children, we're always telling them, don't let anybody touch you here, or don't let anybody touch you there. Those are your private places. But we've never gone into detail of, don't ever let anybody force you to touch them, which is a whole nother side of abuse. Or don't let anybody, you know, if there's a man who might make a little girl sit and watch him masturbate, for example, that's also a form of abuse and assault. But we never think to tell children that. Obviously, you don't have to go into such detail. And I think that's also another issue, is parents say, I'm not talking to my 3-year-old about sex. You're not. You're not talking to your 3-year-old about sex. You're talking to your 3-year-old about good touch and bad touch. And as a 3-year-old, they don't know any different. So they go, oh, okay, cool. It's the same as, don't touch that stove. It's hot. Okay, I mustn't touch the stove. It's hot. I'll burn myself. Don't let anybody touch me on my private parts. It's wrong. Okay, cool. I won't let any. It's logic to a child, because they don't have all the other stuff going on in their heads like we do. So yeah, sorry, slightly off topic, but I thought I'd throw that in there. Yeah,
I think you mentioned that a lot of it is very much layered. Like you mentioned how there's touching, there's also other aspects that are involved. Because GBV is such a broadly defined term, there's so many different aspects that need to be taught and need to be made aware of. And the reality is that a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old needs to know this. A 15-year-old, some of us even realize what is happening to us. I mean, last year at 21 years old. So the conversation needs to be ongoing. It needs to start young. I definitely agree with you with that. And also the whole thing of victim blaming and judgment and casting doubt is usually the instinct response to that. Another thing as well is I want to just mention is silencing. And how that's also a very much another big contributor to victims not being able to speak out about their experiences. And it tends to be a lot of people with money and power who exercise this a lot, because, I mean, they will use that to kind of keep you quiet. And generally, we also live in a society where there's a lack of accountability. There's just a big lack of accountability. And yeah. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of emphasis on how women can prevent what is happening, or how to put themselves in that position. And there was a question here that asked, what other What other, sorry, my meeting chat is just gone missing. There was a chat here that the perpetuation of rape culture in conversations is also so popular in male sports and male conversations, and it just takes men being aware of what it is and just calling it out immediately and putting an end to it, because that can't be part of people's vocabulary. It's absolutely wrong. And I mean, it doesn't even have to be a thing. I know you mentioned how you want to personalize it, but I just wish men don't have to personalize it for it to be real, because the stats are too high. Is somebody sitting next to you?
Yeah.
The chances of it happening, of somebody sitting next to you in our country, is extremely, extremely high. Yeah. So this is a matter that should concern everybody, not that it's whether we personalize it or we don't. It really, it's just in our country, we cannot always have to rely on it. What if it was this person? Because it's the person sitting next to you, you know? And there was a question about what other projects do you do on top of the handbag drive? And you have mentioned about your male mentorship program. So could you let us know what it is about and what the content material is of that program?
Sure. So this program we've been running for almost four, this is our 4th year now. And we've obviously had some growing pains, and we've changed it up, and we've adapted it. And this year, I think it is running the best. And what we do is we've got 4 different areas. We've got KwaMashu, Mulweni, Embo, and Hammersdale. And we have a mentor for each area that actually lives in the community. They work with us. We know them personally. We know them really, really well. They are incredible, passionate. They're going to change the world, these 4 men. But so what they've done in their different communities is they've set up, I want to say support groups, but they're not, they're mentorship groups, where young boys between the ages of 12 and 15 join this group, and they meet once to twice a week, depending on schooling, etc. And they do something within their community to help the community. So we're teaching them how to help others. That's one aspect of it, where, for example, the boys went out in Hammersdale and they found a man who had been living in a house that was literally falling apart. And for Mandela Day, they took it upon themselves to build this man a house. And that's what they did. They got everything sponsored. They did everything themselves, and they built this man a house. And then not Embo, Mulweni, the group decided they found a gogo who didn't have much food, so they got a food parcels in for her, and while they were there, they redid her garden for her, and they did that amongst themselves. And yeah, they're doing little bits like that just to show them, to identify people in their community that need help and how to help them. That doesn't cost them anything. It's from the goodness of their heart. They can do so much with nothing. So that's just their sort of community service side of it. And then we sit with them each week. They meet, they have a different topic that they will discuss in depth. And obviously the different areas have different topics that they will cover depending on what's prevalent in their different area, but they will eventually all cover the same topics. And it's things like, obviously, rape, things like consent, sexual orientation, bullying, careers. There's a whole list of different topics that we cover with these boys. And we then take those boys, and there's normally about 20 to 30 boys in each community. We choose 10 from each one, and we then do a 3-4 day camp with them where we really go in depth about what all this means, and how you are supposed to treat a woman, and what it means to be a real man, and about bullying and about peer pressure. And we really, and I think the most important part about this mentorship program is we don't go and look for prefects. We don't go and look for the head boy. We go and look for the child who's battling. We go look for the child who's maybe bunking a few lessons. We want the naughty ones, if I can say that, because those are the ones that others will listen to. Those are the influencers. And if we can change the minds of the influencers, and we found through running this program for 4 years, that so many of these young boys are, yes, they were bunking class and maybe stealing and things like that, but when you find out the deeper set of their home life, they don't have a father, or they're living they are the sole breadwinner in their family, but they're just a child, or they have been abused themselves. And you really get the backstory, and you realize that these boys actually just need mentors, because how can you know how to grow up if you're not taught properly? And it's not taught in schools. It's not taught by Gogo, who's looking after 5 and other children. They need to have a role model that they can look up to, and this is what these mentors have become for them. And I mean, these mentors are, you know, then they themselves have come from communities. One of them's brother was a drug dealer that ended up overdosing. Another one literally came from nothing. One of them is a school teacher. One of them is a policeman. So they have come from these townships. They were born in these communities, and they have grown up in these communities, and they have turned themselves around to become amazing young men. So I think it really is an incredible role model for these boys to look up to these men and have that father figure in their life now. And also the initiative that these boys take is unbelievable. They will go to their mentor and say, this week, can we please go to this house because I think that this little girl is being abused by the neighbor. And then they will take the policeman with, and they will sort it all out. And it really is, it's amazing to see the change in these young boys who go from these sort of arrogant, sarcastic little nonsenses, and then they come out the other side really empowered. And yeah, it really is an incredible campaign to see. And as I say, I know it's not female focused, but we're fixing the problem.
Mm. Yeah, I wish like programs like that should exist throughout the country, and sometimes perhaps think, should that be integrated into the school curriculum to kind of get it, you know, reach the larger board of the actual nation. Yeah, it's very, very impressive. And you spoke about consent as one of the content materials in that, and I'd like for you to share what that specifically talks to in that program in terms of consent.
I think for us, we start off with a piece of paper that says at the top, do you know what consent is? And they all sit and they write yes, or they tick the box, or, you know, we've got this different material for each group. And then we leave it we never discuss consent in the first one. And then about 2 or 3 weeks later, we go back into it and we say to them, okay, so you all ticked yes, you understand consent, that's great. So we then sort of play them a few scenarios, like we say, okay, if you take a girl home and you say, let's have sex, and she says yes, is that consent? And they all say yes. So you say, great, yes, that's consent, great. And then you say, so you meet this girl on WhatsApp or Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is these days, and you then plan to meet up, and you pay for the Uber, you go and fetch her, you take her for dinner, you pay for the dinner, you buy her a drink, you pay for the drink, you pay for the Uber back to her house, you then invite her inside. Can you now have sex with her? They all say yeah. And you say, why? And they say, well, we bought her something to drink, we paid for the Uber, we've spent so much money on this girl, obviously that's what we're going to get at the end. And that's when it really hits home, and we say, no, that is not consent. And they all go, what do you mean? And you explain, consent is very simple. It's a yes or a no. It's a, okay, I'm going to do this, or I'm not. It's a, I'm sober enough to say yes, or I'm too drunk to say no. And we really go into depth on those sorts of things, and the whole grooming side of it, and the sugar daddies and all those sorts of things. I mean, you don't even want to know, if you go onto social media, there are actual groups where you can go and find a sugar daddy. And also for us, it's also protection of the boys, because there is another side to it where girls will get themselves into a situation where they'll end up having sex with a boy and then realizing, oh crap, I shouldn't have done that. Everyone's now going to think I'm a slut, or my mom's going to find out, or. So we say to these boys, make sure you cover yourselves as well. Make sure, if you are a decent man and she has consented, make sure you 100% know that, and make sure she is ready, and make sure you know what the consequences will be if she turns around and says, oh no, he raped me. So there's different sides. You know, we also, I mean, we don't just go in and bully these boys and tell them they're absolutely useless and we're trying to make them better people. We try and explain to them that we're trying to help them as well. We're trying to protect them as well. So there's always two sides to it. But I think the biggest thing for us is trying to explain to them that you can't buy a woman, you can't have sex with a woman if she is drunk. It doesn't matter if she's falling all over you, she's not conscious enough to be able to have made that decision. There's a reason you can't drink and drive. You also shouldn't be having sex while you're drunk. It's not you're not there. You're not in your head. So from a protection side for the boys is if a girl is really, really drunk, do not sleep with her because there could be really bad consequences. And also you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. So yeah, and obviously we elaborate on it all, but yeah, I'm trying to keep this short. I know we're a bit stuck for time.
Yeah, and also consent is something that's continuous.
Yes.
It's not something that always just happens once. So like if I say yes in the beginning, then what if later on you might realize, okay, I actually don't feel comfortable with this.
Yeah.
I should then also be able to say yes.
If I can say to you, I'm sure everybody on here, you have their email addresses. Otherwise, when you guys are finished here, please go and Google consent cup of tea. Just type in on YouTube consent and cup of tea. There is a censored version. If you don't mind a few F words, you'll be okay with the other one, but there is a censored version, so maybe look for the censored version. But in a nutshell, it explains to you consent using the theory of a cup of tea. So it's, Tabata, would you like a cup of tea? And you say, oh, actually not today. So I say, okay, cool. And then I see you the next day and I say, how would you like some tea? And you say, oh, I'd love some tea. So I go off, I boil the kettle, I get the tea bag, I put the sugar in, I go get the milk, I boil, I make the tea, I make sure it's right. I come, I give it to you and you go, oh, actually, you know what? I don't feel like tea anymore. I'm not going to hold you down and pour that tea down your throat because you've said, I don't want the tea. Even though 10 minutes ago you said, actually, I do want the tea, you're allowed to change your mind and not want the tea anymore. But anyway, enough. You can watch the video. It's incredible and it explains it beautifully. We actually, in the moment, we're working with Johnson's Workwear on creating a South African version of it because that's obviously the British one. So we're in the process of doing that. So once that's out, I'll also send the link to you guys and you can share it.
Please do. I think also one thing to also remember is that consent also exists in relationships as well. I think people, once they believe, okay, I've got a partner now, and now all of a sudden you assume that you can get the things that you want, whereas that's not the case. Consent still continues to exist even within relationships, and like you've said, the principles still apply.
I mean, you can also be raped by your spouse because he could come home drunk, he wants to have sex, you don't, he pushes himself on you. It's still considered sex. We had in our actual mentorship, one of our mentorship groups, we had a discussion with the young boys and they said, but what about lobola? And we said, what do you mean? They said, well, a man is paying for his wife, so she is now his property. So he has paid for her, so now he can have sex with her whenever he wants. So we had to really break that one. And obviously it's a sensitive topic because it's a cultural thing. So luckily our mentor, one of our mentors in that group had the same culture. So he was able to break it down and explain it and say, yes, you have paid lobola and whatever, but you still do not own that woman. She still has her own rights. She still has the choice to be able to say no. And I don't know how we are for time, but I just like to break off slightly and say as well, is that a lot of the young boys have been, I mean, we've learned so much from the boys. These boys have taught us so much, is that they're saying, but we, you grow up you're all living in one room. You've got your mattresses on the floor, your parents are over there, dad gets home from a long day of work, mom's not really feeling like it, dad says, shut up, get on the bed, this is happening. And you've got the kids lying literally on a mattress next to you watching this happen. So from a baby, you've grown up knowing that's how it works. When you get home from work, you've worked all day to supply food from this family, you feel like getting it on, well, that's the way it is. So again, it's about saying, and it is so sensitive to say to them, yes, that's how you've been brought up, but actually it's not right. So yeah, and also again, you've got children all sleeping in the same bed. So you've got an older brother or an older cousin because parents have passed away or are working or whatever, and they're sleeping in the same bed, and now the older cousin goes, I'm feeling a bit, I'm going to start fiddling with my little cousin or my little sister. And, it's a very sensitive, difficult thing to discuss. So, yeah, we take it very slowly. We break it down. We explain it. It's done. And all the programs are set by a counseling psychologist.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to a question here by Ms. Darwood. The question is, do you believe the restorative justice system that South Africa has set up for offenders for early parole for sexual offenders? And would you participate in that process if it were ever to come up? Especially since that process often hardly includes the victims and mostly focuses on the perpetrator, and with COVID-19 and the government trying to reduce the prison population.
Yeah. It's a very difficult one. I think we need to start seriously talking about accountability, and saying, if I break it up for you, if there are 1,000 rapes, for example, 100 of those rapes are reported out of that 1,000. So 900 have gone unknown about. So you take 100, those have been reported. Out of those 100, 10 only end up opening a case. And out of those 10, 7 end in conviction. So out of 1,000 rapes, 7 perpetrators are going to prison. That's bad enough to start with. Now you've got those 7 people in prison are either getting bail or they are getting let out on early parole, or so I think there needs to be more accountability, and we need to start asking those questions to our government, to our councillors, to our, the people in those roles, and start saying to them, why is this happening? There was a poll done on in a prison where they asked a whole bunch of rapists. They said, why did you rape in the first place? And they all turned around and they said, because we knew we wouldn't get caught. So it's, and also in that same study, they were also asked how many times had they raped before they were caught, and the answer was 29. So I think the responsibility, first of all, and bear with me on this one, don't scream at me down the computer, is for the survivors themselves to start reporting and opening cases. So those 900 that went unrecorded, first of all, those need to be, that percentage needs to be increased. We need to start helping women be able to come out. We need to start educating the police centers on how to receive a rape victim and how to deal with it and how to process it properly. We need to educate the community about Tutuzela centers. How many of you on here, I know we can't answer this, there's no feedback, but just within yourselves, how many of you know what a Tutuzela center is? Probably none. How many of you know, if you do, where your closest one is? You don't. So at every government hospital, there is a Tutuzela center, which is specifically for abuse and rape. It is where you go to have your rape kit taken. It is where you go to give your statement. Everything is done under one roof. It is incredible. I know you hear the word government hospital and some of you might cringe. I would take my children there. I would go there. It is amazing. It is separate from the hospitals. Those staff are so dedicated. I know them all personally. I've been there to all of them. I know them all. They are amazing people. They are so dedicated. Trust me, they're not there for the money. They are amazing, amazing people. So if we can get that message out there that there is help, there are places to go to, we can hopefully increase those numbers. Then our rape stats, unfortunately, will increase, which is what needs to happen. So often when they release the stats, I get a phone call from every newspaper. Aren't you excited that the rape stats have gone down? I say no. I want those rape stats to quadruple. I want them to go up as much as possible, because that means everybody is reporting. So if that's the first step, I feel, is that we need to get more people reporting. Then we need to help with evidence collection. We need to help with the court process. We need to help with helping these children through court process, through people through court. Trust me, it's not a nice process. It is absolutely horrific, but you need to be prepped. You need to be helped properly through that process. Then once eventually all those people are behind bars, we need to work to keeping them there. So we need to start questioning our government. We need to start doing, I can't think of the word now, but we need to go in there into Parliament and say this is what and where and how and who. I've been part of one before where the law used to be that you were not allowed to take perpetrator's DNA. It was against, it was an invasive to take his DNA, and I was part of the process of getting that changed. To say, well, excuse me, after you've raped me, I have an earbud stuck in every single orifice of my body. They take my hair, they scrape under my nails, they absolutely, pick me to pieces, and you're telling me it's not fair for you to have an earbud in your cheek. So that law was then changed. You are now allowed to do that, and he is now allowed to be put on the database for future DNA, which is actually, since that has happened, they've been able to catch a lot more perpetrators because of the DNA now being logged. So we need to do more things like that. We need to stand up and say, enough is enough. You are letting these people out. They are being caught again and again and again, the same person, and you keep letting them out. So accountability, accountability, accountability. We can't just sit here and moan and start little Facebook groups. We've had enough. We need to actually do something where we write letters, we protest outside Parliament, we, get change done. I mean, if the bus drivers don't want to drive the buses, they block the streets and they stand there until they get what they want. So maybe that's what we need to start doing. I'm going to get myself arrested here, but you get my gist.
Yeah, I think it definitely, what you're saying is that in the same breath of encouraging people to open cases, we need a system that actually protect us. And like you said, we've been shouting and crying, enough is enough. But what will it take for the government to actually act?
Yeah, and I think now is the perfect time, because our president stood up himself in front of the whole nation on TV saying gender-based violence is enough, we need to make a stop. Well, then do it. Stop standing. I think one of the problems with this country is we have seminars and we have all these conferences, and they cost millions. If we took those millions and actually did something, change would happen. Instead of everybody getting together and talking about it, do it. Do. Stop, talk, and do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just, by the way, there is a GBV protest happening on the 29th of August, this Saturday. So yeah, hopefully we'll get to circulate that information. But people to get involved, to go and be involved in those marches, they are happening, and there is one happening on the 29th. Yeah. Thank you so much for answering that question. I think that was, like Nikita said, it's very, very helpful. I don't know if anyone would like to ask any more questions for those who are still here. Otherwise, perhaps another question would be, you've spoken a lot about the tools that you've had, and obviously being aware, and what advice now would you give someone who has or is experiencing a form of gender-based violence? Someone who's scared, someone who doesn't know what to do, someone who's just realized that this has happened to me. Yeah.
I think I'd like to break that into two parts. And first of all, for those people who haven't reported or are too scared to report or don't know who to talk to, I would say, think about, and again, I'm going to personalize it, sorry, but if you don't want to do it for you, do it for their next victim. There was the most powerful thread on Facebook. I wish I actually had the picture to show you, but it was a young lady who said, I asked my rapist to wear a condom because I was HIV positive. And then the people commented and said, why the hell do you care about him? And she commented, I don't care about him, I care about his next victim. So I think for me, I've got goosebumps now and I'm probably going to start crying. But that was just so powerful to think, if you're not going to do it for you, report it for the next person. Because if you can be the person to put them behind bars, you're going to be the person to stop them from raping somebody else. So for me, knowing that all 5 of my perpetrators are behind bars and are still behind bars, I know that they haven't been able to hurt anybody else. And that was a huge part of my healing journey. Not worry about them getting me again, or me having, beat them and lock them up. It was nothing to do with that. It was the fact that they can't hurt anybody else. They are not going to be able to do that to anybody else. And if you take the average statistics of everybody's done it 29 times before, that's 29 times 5 people that I've potentially helped from being raped. So I think do it. Yeah, and also if you're in that situation where it's happening to you and it's your neighbor or it's your father or it's your stepfather or whatever the case may be, and you've got siblings, do it for them, because you know how it feels for it to be happening to you. You don't want it to happen to them. So be their protector. And please, the Tutuzela centers are, I don't know if you guys can send out a link afterwards, but they are everywhere. Almost every government hospital has one, and I promise you they are well run. They're separate from the hospitals and the police stations. They are amazing. Those women are so well trained. They are sensitive. They are amazing. And all of our handbags are at the Tutuzela centers. So we also get involved. We offer counseling, free counseling to anybody that's affected. And then the other side of it is, if it has happened to you and you're on your healing journey, is just remember that they took something from you on that day that you could not prevent. And I don't care if you say to yourself, yeah, but I shouldn't have been there, or that, can you still see me? Sorry, it's just come up battery low. Did you get me there? So is that don't question yourself. There is nothing you could have done to prevent that. It's happened. You can't go back in time. So they took something from you on that day that you can't prevent. So now going forward is your choice. Everything you do from now on is your choice. It's your decision. So they took something from you on that day that you can't prevent. Don't let them take any more. So for me, people say to me, have you ever, do you still go back to that dam? Or, are you scared of men now? And I say, they raped me. They took that from me. I'm not going to let them take the dam. The dam did nothing to me. It is the most beautiful, calming, incredible place. And I have been back there many times. And, people ask me, yes, but, it happened at my uncle's house. Now I never want to go back to my uncle's house. Because that man's in jail, but I just don't let them take your family from you. I don't know if I'm coming across properly, but they took something from you can't prevent. Don't let them take the rest of your life. The rest of your life is in your hands. You decide on what happens in the rest of your life. And it is difficult in the beginning to have that mindset, which is why it's so important to go for counseling, because they give you the tools to be able to realize that within yourself and realize you are still an amazing person. You're still the same person as you were before. Nothing has changed.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolute pleasure.
We have another question here. If you were the decision maker, what would your priority for schools be to ensure that we improve awareness of gender-based violence?
I would say the education within young schools. Again, I'm talking 3-year-olds, pre-primary. The education on what is good touch, what is bad touch, where you can be touched, where you can't be touched, and that it is okay to speak out. It doesn't matter what anybody says to you. You can talk to somebody. Your teacher is there for you. And also, that's why I think it was so frustrating for me during lockdown, is they kept saying, we can't send these kids to school because it's not safe. And I'm saying that is the safest place for these children. They've got a teacher they can talk to. They are being taken out of the situation where they are being abused. So our numbers have hugely increased for counselling since lockdown. And surprisingly enough, as far as the children that we are counselling, up to about 50%, if not more, are young boys that are coming forward for counselling. So, I'd say education within the young children on how to prevent this from happening and how to be a respectful man, how to respect the opposite sex, whether it be female or male, how to respect the opposite sex and how to be respected within yourself. And then for the older generation in the high schools and that, I think consent needs to be broken down. And like I said, not a case of yes and no, it needs to be broken down deeply. I promise you, consent is like a 6-week program that you can go into. Yeah.
Thank you for answering. Thank you for the question and thank you for answering it. I think we've reached the time to end. It's been an hour and a bit, but I think this conversation was needed for me. I think it was needed for all the attendees, and I'm incredibly grateful to be able to have had this conversation with you. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us about something that should concern all of us. And it's not only a matter that starts when it hits home. It's an active thing that we need to continue to. It's an act. We need to act on things that matter in our lives, and hopefully we have people here who can push things forward to make sure that this thing just comes to an end. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for the attendees for interacting and being patient with us to get this going. Yes, and we'll definitely send out the links to all the things that you've mentioned. And yes, thank you very much.
No, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for giving me the opportunity and the platform to be able to speak to all your amazing people. And the fact that you are on this webinar in the first place shows that you are willing to be part of that change. So I'm going to challenge all of you. I would just like to say to each of you to please find it within yourselves to just talk to, even if it's 2 people. Talk to 2 people, tell them about, show them the consent video, tell them about a Tutuzela Center, just speak to 2 people about something, because I see there's 36 people on here. So if you times that by 2, that's at least a whole bunch more people who will know about where to go and what to do, and that it's okay to speak out. And please, if any of you have any questions you'd like to ask, you're welcome to message us on our Facebook or our Instagram. We will get back to you as soon as we can. And yeah, please look at our website for any more information. But yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really, really appreciate it.
Okay, I think we'll hand over to Gustav or Dr. Venter if he wants to do anything else for us.
That's fine. Thank you, Sandisiwe. You said everything. Thank you, Jes, for your time, and thanks to everyone for participating. And we hope to see you again very soon on similar webinars. So you're free to leave the meeting now. Jes, I know your battery's running low, so all the best with that. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry again for the mix-up in the beginning.
No problem at all.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, all of you.